Unshakable power, the strength they fear. There are people who don't want you to recognize your true power, not because you don't deserve it, but because once you do, they can no longer control you. Maybe you felt it before, when you started changing, setting boundaries, and refusing to be manipulated. Suddenly, certain people around you became uneasy. They didn't like the shift, not because you were wrong, but because you were no longer easy to control. True strength doesn't seek validation. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. The moment you become calm, self-assured, and free from the need for approval, you're already stronger than most. That's why some people fear you, even when you've done nothing to them. They sense something in you that you might not even see in yourself yet: independence, the realization that you don't need them, that you can stand on your own, unshaken, and that terrifies them. Because of this fear, they'll try to pull you down. They'll plant doubt in your mind, make you feel like you're too different, too much, or that you need to tone yourself down to fit in. But the truth is, you are not the problem. Their insecurities is. You don't need to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. It's time to see yourself as clearly as they do, a person so powerful that they cannot control. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button. Things are about to get hotter. The power of presence. There are two kinds of power in this world: the kind that demands attention, loud, boastful, always trying to be seen; the kind that cannot be ignored, the quiet presence that shifts a room without saying a word. The second kind is what people fear, the kind you might not even recognize in yourself yet. You've seen it before, a person who enters a room and suddenly everything changes. Conversations pause, people turn to look. Not because they are loud, not because they demand attention, but because something about them commands it effortlessly. They don't need to prove anything, they just are. This is the kind of presence that unsettles people who rely on external validation. Your quiet confidence, your refusal to conform, your ability to move through life without needing approval, it shakes them. Some people will be drawn to you, respecting you without knowing why. Others will resent you, trying to tear you down because they can't control you the way they control others. If you've ever noticed a shift in how people treat you, this is why. When you stop explaining yourself, stop needing permission, stop proving your worth, people notice. Some grow quiet, some lash out, some try to pull you back into a version of yourself that was easier for them to handle. Your presence alone changes things, and they don't know how to deal with it. Real power isn't about saying the most, doing the most, or proving anything. It's about not needing to. The greatest figures in history carried this wisdom. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in Rome, never needed to boast about his status. Instead, he reminded himself to stay humble, in control, and free from the need for external recognition. True strength is self-mastery. When you walk into a room, people don't just listen to what you say, they watch how you carry yourself. They notice your patience, the way you hold eye contact, the way you don't rush to fill silence with nervous words. They see that you don't react the way they expect you to, that you don't seek approval, that you are not playing the same game as those desperate to be liked, and that unsettles them. Some people will test you, interrupt you, dismiss your ideas, or try to make you feel small, just to see if they can break your composure. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because they need to reassure themselves that you are not as strong as you appear. So, ask yourself, are you apologizing for your existence in small ways? Are you over-explaining, over-justifying, or overcompensating? Are you allowing others to dictate how you think, feel, and move? Or are you holding your ground, allowing your presence to speak before you do? This is not arrogance. This is not dominance. This is certainty. Knowing who you are so deeply that the world has no choice but to recognize it. Real power is not about shouting. It's about the quiet, unshakable presence of someone who does not need to prove themselves. When you stop chasing approval, when you stop reacting to every challenge, when you stop waiting for permission, everything changes. People will treat you differently. Some will admire you. Some will fear you. Some will try to break you. But none of them will be able to ignore you. A man who needed no approval couldn't be controlled. They told him it was impossible. They told him he was wasting his time. They told him he needed a real job, a real career, a real future. But he didn't listen. His name is David. He loves art, painting, music, creativity. It's what makes him feel alive. But in his why? Because he had done what they were too afraid to do. He had chosen himself. This is the power of someone who doesn't need approval. Your life, your rules. How many decisions have you hesitated on because you were afraid of what people would think? How many times have you silenced yourself, played small, held back, because the fear of judgment was louder than your own voice? That ends today. If you need approval, you can be controlled. And if you can be controlled, you will never be free. From childhood, society conditions you to seek validation. You're rewarded for compliance, told what's acceptable, respectable, worth your time. They don't want you to think for yourself. They don't want you to step outside the lines, because the moment you do, you become unpredictable. And unpredictable people cannot be controlled. That's why people panic when you stop seeking their approval. That's why they try to shame you, guilt you, pressure you into conformity. Not because they care, but because they fear what your independence represents. How many people live their whole lives in quiet submission, following rules they never agreed to, staying in jobs they hate, relationships that drain them, expectations that suffocate them because they are too afraid to step out of line? They aren't living, they are performing. And that's why they need you to stay in line too. Because if you break free, they will have to face the reality that they could have done the same. And nothing scares them more than that. So, what would you do if no one's opinion mattered? If no one was watching? If no one could judge you? Would you leave the job that drains you? Would you finally pursue that passion you buried under years of conditioning? You don't need permission to be great. No one is going to hand you an invitation to step into your power. No one is going to come along and tell you, now you are worthy. You have to decide that for yourself. And when you do, expect resistance. Expect criticism. Expect people to try to pull you back down. That's how you'll know you're doing something right. The unshakable mindset one. Approval is a trap. Break free. Weak people crave validation. They wait for permission, needing someone to tell them what's possible, what's acceptable, what's allowed. But the strong, they create their own rules. David didn't sit around waiting for the world to acknowledge him. He worked, struggled, built his own path from nothing, and now he lives life on his terms. The same people who doubted him now respect him, not because he proved them wrong, but because he proved himself right. That's what you must do. Stop explaining, stop justifying, stop waiting for approval. The world does not reward hesitation, it rewards action. The people who move, who decide they are enough even when no one else believes it, they are the ones who rise. Be that person. The moment you stop needing validation, you become unstoppable. 2. Control yourself, and they can't control you. Life is a game of control. Whether you see it or not, people will test you. They will provoke you, insult you, undermine you, all to get a reaction. Because the moment you react the way they want, you give them power. This plays out everywhere. In business, the calm negotiator wins over the one who loses composure. In relationships, the person who stays emotionally steady holds the upper hand. In daily life, the driver who cuts you off, the co-worker who gets under your skin, they all win the second you react. Control isn't about being the loudest, it's about being unmoved. Most people are slaves to their emotions. They let anger dictate their actions, frustration shape their decisions. But the one who rules himself rules everything. Marcus Aurelius, one of history's greatest leaders, understood this. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This isn't philosophy, it's strategy. When someone provokes you, see it as a test, not an attack. When emotions rise, slow everything down. Silence is a weapon. Never let someone else's chaos dictate your state of mind. Master yourself, and you become untouchable. 3. Your silence is their nightmare. Some people cannot handle silence. They need noise, arguments, explanations, drama, anything to avoid confronting their own thoughts. So they provoke, they insult, they try to bait you into reacting. But when you don't, when you simply look at them, unshaken, unbothered, that is when they panic, because silence forces them to face themselves. Think about the last time someone tried to pull you into a pointless fight. A co-worker, a so-called friend, a stranger online. They weren't looking for a discussion. They were looking for control. They needed you to react so they could feel powerful. But the moment you refuse to engage, they lose. The greatest power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't seek validation. It simply is. That's why the most respected people in